Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Nick. I'm a voice teacher, I'm a professional musician, and I'm a content creator. And if you're not new here and you're returning, welcome back. It's so nice to have you. This video is slightly different than the usual content I put out, and I'm going to be talking about what it's like to be a professional musician in 2024. If you're not watching this in 2024, maybe it's 2025, 26 and beyond, or some weird time travel-y Doctor Who thing where it's 2020 or something, I hope that these rules and this advice that I'm going to give you in this video still apply. So let's talk about being a professional musician. This video is inspired by Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, which is this wonderful book. And in the book, he explains that if you're a creative person, if you're a musician or an artist or something, it's good to not only share your work, but to show your work. So people may buy a painting from you. They may buy tickets to your show or whatever. They want to see the finished product, but what they also want to see is sort of the underbelly, or you open the hood of the car and see the behind the scenes footage. And that's what I hope to do in this video, to shed some light on what my life is like and to educate you. And if you're a professional musician yourself, or you want to be someday, hopefully this video will help you. What we should probably cover first is that professional musician is a very vague term. We think of Taylor Swift. Is she a professional musician? Yeah, she's really on, in terms of income at least, on that top end of the spectrum. And then someone who's maybe doing part-time music gigs or something like that may be on the other end of that income spectrum. And in this video, I hope to shed some light on the realities of being a professional musician, what it's been like for me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And by the end, if you found this video insightful and helpful, I would really appreciate and love to hear your experience as a musician. Are you a full-time musician? Are you a part-time musician? Are you someone who just loves music and maybe wants to do a little bit more of it as a side hustle or something like that? I'd love to hear your story. If you have no experience with music and you're simply a listener, I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this whole experience. So let's dive right in. One of the first main points I want to make is about education. And first things first, I have to say it, I was incredibly fortunate, incredibly privileged to have the opportunity to pursue music education. I had a supportive family, I had wonderful teachers, I went to wonderful schools, and I had opportunities that not everyone gets. So I acknowledge that I'm incredibly lucky and incredibly privileged to do that. And a very brief backstory on my history of singing and of music education is I started when I was 5, simply because all of my siblings did it and I didn't want to feel left out. I did singing lessons, I did piano lessons, I did music theory lessons, I did ear training lessons, I did organ lessons, I did French horn lessons. I've kind of done it all, which all eventually led me to the University of Toronto. We don't have to get into the ins and outs of university. There's great things that happen in university. There's not so great things. The fact is, I moved 1,800 kilometers to go to school. I didn't really know anybody, and it took me some time to adjust to life in the city. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would probably try to do it with less anxiety, which is easier said than done. But I spent a lot of time worrying about classes and things that didn't really have any significance. So courses like psychology and sociology were courses I had to take as sort of additional credits to get my degree. I wish I had spent less time being anxious about those classes and just focused on the music. And I learned how to deal with anxiety, but anxiety was not the first major roadblock that I hit on my path to becoming a professional musician. It's that I started to hate music. And as you can see from my social channels, or if you know me, it's Nick Higgs the singer. So obviously I didn't hate it enough that I stopped, or at least something changed in my journey that allowed me to love it again. So here's what happened. I wanted to go to music school because I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to level up my skills. And for my line of work, for classical singing, that's what I went to school for, the next step was to go to university and achieve higher education. That's obviously not for everyone, but for me, that was the obvious next step. But here's what they don't tell you about music school. Obviously, I went there with the full expectation that I would have good teachers, hopefully, right? And they would be critiquing me. But that constant sense of being graded and being critiqued, while it's necessary, it chips away at your love for what you do. And like most new university students, you go in with excitement and with energy, and then over the course of your degree, you start to hate what you do. So the constant grading and academic feeling of music just started to chip away at the love of it. And even in performance, we were being graded on our performances in concerts. So you lost that love of live performance. And then for whatever reason, I don't really know why, I went into a master's Masters of Opera Performance program, which was 2 years, and I went to the same school. And I don't need to go into too much detail about that program, but I will say, if your school is organized and efficient, appreciate it while you can, because it's not always like that. Just to wrap up this point and going over the timeline. So from the age of 5, I had all this training with these teachers that were great, and I loved it, and singing was so much fun. It wasn't fun all the time, but for the most part, it was fun. I went to university with energy and excitement, and then that killed it. And I hated singing for a while. So now we arrive at the year 2020. And what happened in March 2020? Well, we went into lockdown. So here begins a major hurdle and life block for musicians and for everyone really, but the pandemic. Obviously the priority at this time was health and being safe, and at a certain point people weren't really thinking about work, but eventually that thought crept in. And one of the main issues for professional musicians, and obviously I'm going to talk about it through a singing lens, was job security. And this industry of live performance, classical music, opera, it's deeply in decline. So before the pandemic, there were already many companies that were struggling to sell tickets, to get people to come to their shows, specifically to get young people to come to their shows, and the pandemic was just the nail in the coffin. And let's not forget, I went into a Masters of Opera program with the full expectation that when I graduated, I would be hired by opera companies, big and small, to perform. And the pandemic slashed a lot of hopes for a lot of people to do that. But here's the thing, and I haven't really spoken to many people about this. I certainly have never said it on camera. In the back of my mind, I never wanted to do that anyway. And that's partly on me because I like to be home. I'm a homebody. I like to make my own schedule, and the opera singer lifestyle was just not one that I wanted to have. So here's a quick breakdown of what happened, and I'm paraphrasing and changing things slightly to make sense of it all, but if we can look at it in the grand scheme of things, is that there are big companies, there are medium-sized companies, and then there are small companies. And I would say the majority of companies that were hiring people that could give them a decent amount of money for a role or for a gig would be the middle company. And then you had the small teeny weeny companies that could hire maybe a couple of people, and it was a small operation, but you had a lot of fun. So what kind of ended up happening, at least in my experience, was the big companies, they were gonna be fine. They had some financial loss, but what that meant for them is maybe the next season they would do one fewer opera. Or maybe they had to let some people go. So they would still survive. And then there were the small companies where maybe, and this isn't the case for everyone, but maybe they could get some sort of government grant or some sort of funding to help keep them afloat. But it was the mid-sized companies that couldn't maybe apply for government grants because they were a for-profit organization, or maybe they made too much money in the run of a year. They were the ones that really struggled and inevitably sunk and went bankrupt. And the problem with this is for young singers who are just coming out of university, who maybe wouldn't get hired right off the bat from these big companies, they were hiring young singers, and all of a sudden they're gone. And this goes across the board for companies that do musical theater, maybe orchestras or instrumental ensembles. It's the same thing. It was the middle that really struggled and would go bankrupt. So as musicians, we had to pivot, and some people went into different careers entirely because they just couldn't make it work. Some are still trying to make that gigging life work, and all the power to them, and some of them are doing really well. And then there's someone like myself who wanted to stay in music but wanted to pivot. And that's what's led me to teaching and content creation. And for me personally, this pivot was very helpful, and it was a very positive thing in my life because it allowed me to fall in love with music again. And let me be clear, the pandemic was horrible. There was a lot of heartbreak, there was so much anxiety and death, and it was just horrible. In a strictly work and professional music lens, if the pandemic hadn't happened, I have no idea what I'd be doing. In fact, this video and this channel and Nick Higgs the Singer as a social media account probably wouldn't exist. And if social media has taught me anything, it's that choral music, Baroque music, Renaissance, classical, it's not in decline. Maybe people aren't going to see live performances much, but it's not in decline. You just have to find the audience in a different way. So there was music education in pursuit of an opera performance career, and then we hit the pandemic, things changed, and I ended up doing content creation and teaching. And if we start with teaching, it's a line of work that many musicians turn to. In fact, there are a lot of teachers who are also performing, kind of like myself, where you're doing a mixture of different things. But for me, I never thought I would be a teacher. And I remember telling my mom, who is a school teacher herself, that teaching would be the last thing I would ever do. But here I am now. And P.S., if you want to work with me and you want to have a singing lesson, click the link in my bio. Or if you want group lessons, you'll find the links in the description. It would be so much fun to work together. So around the years 2021, 2022, I decided I was going to start my own voice studio. And because we were still sort of in the lockdown dealing with pandemic things, it was going to be completely online. And I love it and it's so much fun, but building it was not easy. To be a voice teacher and music teacher, you have to be a salesperson, an administrator, an accountant, a lawyer. But also for your students, you have to be a friend, a colleague, a mentor, and in some cases, a shoulder to cry on. Or in my case, a virtual shoulder to cry on. And this business knowledge was severely lacking in my education. So I went to university, had a business class, and all it was teaching you how to make a resume, how to write a cover letter, and we spent one class working on each thing, how to build a Wix website or something like that. And don't get me wrong, those things are valuable, but there are so many other elements of being a professional musician that you have to know about. Taxes, write-offs, self-employed, sole proprietor, etc., etc. And I have made so many mistakes. Mistakes are good because you can learn from them, but I could have avoided some of those mistakes and probably some financial penalties that I've had to deal with along the way. But the teaching is great. I love it. I have great students. I'm so fortunate to work with them. And if you want to be one of those students, absolutely check out the links in the description. But it was a pivot that I had to make to stay alive because there were no gigs to be had. And I wasn't willing to sit there and do nothing when I could be building a potential stream of income. Okay, so we've talked about education. We've talked about my pivot to teaching. And now I want to give you a real life look at what my calendar looks like on an average week. So we'll use this week's calendar to give you an example. So looking at my calendar right here, I'll be teaching 18 hours this week. I teach my students mostly on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then I have one student on Thursday and one student on Friday. So the whole week, I'm teaching. I'm going to be spending 3 hours at choir rehearsal. So I sing with a Baroque chamber ensemble called Tafelmusik. We rehearse on Tuesday nights for 3 hours. And this is sort of a side note that's not in my calendar, but I'll try my best to practice if I can. Sometimes you just can't. There's just no time in the schedule to make it work. So you have to try and practice in other ways. So I might put on Spotify and listen to the recordings while I'm doing something else. Also this week, I'll spend 3 hours participating in some exams at the university. I'll be singing for the conducting exam. And these 3 hours on Tuesday morning would normally be spent teaching, but I've had to reschedule those students to another time. That's the other thing with teaching. If you have to do makeup lessons or you have to reschedule, you have to find time in your calendar to make that work. So right now we're at about 24 hours total from Monday to Friday. We haven't even talked about content creation yet. So I'll spend about 3 hours filming, including right now I'm filming, and on a regular week, about 8 hours editing. And then every hour that's not scheduled with something will be admin work. So this includes invoicing, scheduling lessons, messaging followers and potential clients, responding to comments, editing my website or social media links, emailing with brands and potential collaborations, emailing administrators or directors for potential gigs, and occasionally traveling for a gig. And all of this work, and there's a lot of it usually in the run of a week, takes about 8 to 10 hours per week, believe it or not. Because you can't forget, if I'm emailing someone or if I'm responding to comments, I have to be professional. I can't just be like, yeah, okay, sounds good, LOL, blah, blah, blah. I can't talk like that. I have to write professional emails. I have to proofread it. I have to make sure I'm saying what I want to say, and that takes time. On top of all that work, I'm also preparing for the summer. So I'm doing a production of Frozen Junior, where I'm music directing and working on the creative team, and I'm also curating a cabaret that'll be happening in August. So those things take time. They take planning, communication, emails, Zoom meetings, all of that stuff piles up. So as the business grows, I'm looking to bring on people to join my team that are more talented than me in certain areas to take on some of these tasks. So if I have someone that can help me with my administrative tasks, maybe that's scheduling or invoicing. If I have someone that can help me with the editing, like a professional editor, that's just going to make my life so much easier and free up my time so I can teach and focus on the things that I'm good at. And all of this being said, I love what I do. This kind of work, content creation, teaching, music making, filming this video for you, lights a fire in me that live performance just doesn't. And obviously I get a thrill when I perform, but it completely depends on the gig. Last summer, for example, I had the opportunity to do Matilda, the musical, where I was the music director and I was also performing in it. And the group of people that I worked with that summer, I love every single one of them. They were absolutely fantastic and I had so much fun, and I could do that every day for the rest of my life and be totally content. Last May, I did a production of Così fan tutte in English where I had to travel and I was away for 3 weeks. And while that was great, it's not kind of the gig that I want to do. And again, I just want to reiterate, I am incredibly grateful and I'm incredibly fortunate for the work that I get to do. The fact that I get to wake up every day and spend it making music with other people, making music on my own and sharing it with you is incredible. I could not ask for a better job. I just want to present to you the difficulties and some of the complications that arise when you're a professional musician. Okay, so you can see that I do a lot of different things. I've had to piece together different jobs, different skills, different streams of revenue to put together a life that makes me happy, but also pays the bills. I'm so fortunate to be in this position, but it's not always easy. And there are things that you have to learn on your own through trial and error, and things that your teacher or a university won't teach you that you have to figure out by yourself. So I love what I do. I'm so fortunate, but with that comes some hardship and some things that you just didn't expect. And I sincerely hope that this video helped you, gave you some insight as to what a life in music is like, what it's like to be a professional musician. It might cause you to reconsider your life choices. It might cause you to be more motivated to become one. But either way, I hope you learned something from my experience. And as my life continues to change and grow and take different directions, I'll be sure to update you on what that looks like. And I'm incredibly grateful for you for supporting me, supporting my channels, and allowing me to create content and make this part of my job. Because content creation is absolutely nothing without an audience. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you want to share your experiences as a musician, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.